The moment Madison Taylor looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're nobody." "Ryan, you'll always be nobody." I knew our 3-year relationship was over. What she didn't know was that the poster of Jason Chen hanging above her bed, the one she kissed every morning, was actually a picture of my little brother. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon at Pacific Northwest University. When everything fell apart, I was sitting in Grind Coffee, the campus coffee shop where Madison and I used to spend hours talking about our dreams. But this time the conversation was different. Madison sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on her phone screen as she scrolled through Instagram. Her blonde hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. And for a moment, I remembered why I fell for her 3 years ago. "Ryan, we need to talk," she said without looking up from her phone. Her voice had that cold tone I'd been hearing more often lately. "This isn't working anymore." I set down my coffee cup, the warmth from the ceramic doing nothing to ease the chill I felt spreading through my chest. "What do you mean?" Madison finally looked at me, her blue eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, disgust. "Look at yourself. Really, look at yourself. You're wearing the same vintage t-shirt you wore last week. You work at a dusty record store for minimum wage. And you drive that beat-up Honda Civic from 2008. Meanwhile, I'm building my brand, growing my following, creating a future for myself." Her words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. I did work at Vinyl Dreams, a small record store downtown. I did drive an old Honda Civic that my dad had given me when I started college. And yes, I preferred vintage band t-shirts to designer clothes. But what Madison didn't understand was that these were choices, not limitations. "Madison, you know I'm studying music production. Record store job gives me connections in the industry, and connections?" She laughed bitterly. "Ryan, you're delusional. You think spinning records for hipsters is going to make you somebody? You think your little bedroom studio is going to compete with real producers?" Before I could respond, Derek Thompson slid into the booth next to Madison, his arm immediately wrapping around her shoulders with practiced familiarity. Derek was everything I wasn't, or at least, everything I appeared not to be. He drove a brand new BMW, wore designer clothes, and his family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the Pacific Northwest. His presence at our table felt like a declaration of war. "Hey babe," Derek said to Madison, completely ignoring me. "Ready to head to that Jason Chen listening party?" I managed to get us VIP access. Madison's entire demeanor changed. Her eyes lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen in months, and she practically bounced in her seat. "Really VIP access to hear the new album before it drops?" "Derek, you're amazing." I watched this interaction with growing confusion and hurt. Madison had been obsessed with Jason Chen for as long as I'd known her. Her dorm room, and later her sorority house room, was covered with his posters. She had every piece of merchandise, every album, every limited edition release. She'd bought expensive concert tickets with money she claimed she couldn't afford. She'd even gotten a small tattoo of his signature on her wrist. But what really twisted the knife was watching her look at Derek with the kind of admiration she used to reserve for me. "Madison," I said quietly, "what's really going on here?" She turned back to me as if she'd forgotten I was there. Derek smirked, clearly enjoying my discomfort. Madison took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. "Ryan, I've been thinking about this for weeks. We're from different worlds. You're content working at a record store and dreaming small dreams. I want more than that. I want to be with someone who can give me the life I deserve. Someone who has ambition, someone who has connections to the things that matter." "Things that matter?" I repeated, feeling a mixture of hurt and anger rising in my chest. Derek chuckled. "Come on, man. Look around you. Madison has 50,000 Instagram followers. She's building a brand, creating content, networking with influencers. What are you bringing to the table? You can't even afford to take her to a decent restaurant." The accusation hit harder because there was truth in it. I had taken Madison to small local places rather than expensive restaurants. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I preferred authentic experiences over flashy displays of wealth. Apparently that had been a mistake. Madison nodded, along with Derek's words. Exactly. And it's not just about money, Ryan. It's about ambition, about wanting to be somebody. Derek understands that. He's connected to people who matter, people who can open doors. Like Jason Chen? I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Madison's eyes practically sparkled. It's exactly like Jason Chen. Derek knows people in the music industry. Real people, not just record store owners and wannabe producers. Derek leaned forward, his smile becoming more predatory. Actually, I might be able to introduce Madison to some industry people at the listening party tonight. You never know. Who might be looking for a social media partner or brand ambassador. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. Here was Madison, ending our relationship because she wanted connections to the music industry, specifically to Jason Chen's world, while sitting across from someone who had those exact connections, but I couldn't tell her that. Not yet. Not like this. So this is it? I asked, looking directly at Madison. 3 years, and you're ending it because you think Derek can get you closer to your celebrity crush? Madison's face flushed red. Don't you dare reduce this to that! This is about my future, about being with someone who understands success and ambition. Derek is going places, Ryan. He's somebody. You're... She paused, searching for the right words to deliver the final blow. You're nobody, Ryan. You'll always be nobody. The coffee shop seemed to fall silent around us. I could feel other students glancing our way, probably drawn by the tension in Madison's voice. Derek was practically glowing with satisfaction, clearly enjoying his victory. Madison looked relieved, as if she'd finally said something she'd been holding back for months. What hit me hardest wasn't the cruelty in Madison's words, it was how completely off base she was. About me, about Derek, about what really matters in life. Sitting there, taking in the full scope of her betrayal, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. This wasn't just a painful ending. It was a gift. I was finally seeing the real Madison, stripped of the illusion I'd fallen for. You know what, Madison? I said as I slowly got to my feet. You're right about one thing. This isn't working anymore. I finished the last of my coffee and placed the cup down with deliberate calm. Derek smirked, clearly anticipating a meltdown or some desperate plea. Madison looked at me, stunned and smug like she hadn't expected me to walk away without. A fight. Well, enjoy the listening party, I said evenly. I'm sure it's exactly the scene you were hoping for. Their laughter trailed behind me as I left the cafe. But instead of shame, I felt something surprisingly liberating peace. And deep down, I knew the day would come when Madison realized just how wrong she'd been about who really mattered. The rain had stopped by the time I stepped outside. The air felt lighter, my chest less tight. For the first time in months, I could really breathe. Tomorrow I had a feeling was going to be interesting. The next morning I woke up to a flood of missed calls, 17 from Madison and double that in texts. Most were the usual, call me, we need to talk. But a few had a very different tone. The last one, sent at 2:47 a.m., simply read, how could you not tell me? I was still trying to process what she meant when my phone rang again. This time it was my younger brother, Jason, likely calling from a hotel somewhere in Europe on his latest tour. Ryan, man, you've got to see this, he said, equal parts amused and alarmed. Some girl posted a video tagging me last night. She's crying, saying she dated my brother and had no idea. It's already hit like 200,000 views. My stomach sank. What kind of video? She's sobbing, holding childhood photos of us, saying she dumped the love of her life without realizing he was my brother. It's intense. She keeps saying she made the biggest mistake of her life. I ran a hand through my hair, sitting up. I never told her we were related. She broke it off yesterday because she thought I had no future. Yeah, I got that, Jason said. She says you worked at a record shop and that she didn't realize you were music royalty adjacent. Her words, not mine. Paused for a second. But here's the weird part. She also posted screenshots of messages she's been sending to my accounts for months. Super fan level stuff. Some of it's, well, let's just say a bit much. Things were starting to make sense. Madison wasn't just a fan, she was one of those fans. The kind who blur the line between fantasy and reality, who create entire stories in their heads about celebrities they've never met. How did she figure it out? I asked, though I already suspected. Brittany Walsh, Jason replied. You know, her Madison's friend? She recognized me in some of the photos on your socials. The ones from Christmas, the beach trip, stuff like that. She put two and two together and told Madison after they got back from some listening party. Of course it was Brittany, always the sharp one in Madison's circle. Where Madison chased attention and glitter, Brittany watched closely, noticed what others missed. And she'd always been the one feeding Madison's obsession with fame and with Jason. There's more, Jason added. That Derek guy Madison's seeing? He's been trying to get in touch with my management team. Claims he's got connections that can boost my career. My manager sent me the messages. He's basically trying to trade access to me using Madison as leverage. The irony was hard to ignore. The guy Madison thought would elevate her status was just another fame chaser. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Using her Jason obsession to open doors. And all the while she dumped the one person who could have introduced her to Jason casually over Sunday dinner. My phone lit up again. Another call from Madison. This time, I picked up. Ryan, thank God, she said, her voice strained, probably from crying. Can we meet? Same cafe as yesterday? Madison, I don't think, please. She interrupted. I know how this looks, but you have to understand I had no idea. I'd known you were Jason Chen's brother. Everything would have been different. There it was. But the truth laid bare. Not if I'd known you were more successful or if I'd known I misjudged your potential. No, it was all about Jason. The fame. The status. Would it really have been different? I asked quietly. Or would you have just seen me as a different kind of opportunity? That's not fair, Ryan. I loved you. I still love you. None of you have to understand what a mind trip this is. I've followed Jason for years. I have his lyrics tattooed on my side. I've spent thousands on concerts and merch. And the whole time, you were right there. And you said nothing. Madison, did you love me or did you love what I could give you? She was silent for a long time. And in that pause, I already knew the answer. That's not a fair question, she said eventually. Love isn't just about feelings, it's about partnership, about building a future, supporting each other's dreams. If you had told me about Jason, I could have supported your music career better. I could have helped you network, helped you make connections. I don't need help networking with my own brother, Madison. Think about what we could have built together. I already have 50,000 followers who trust my recommendations. I could have promoted your music, created content around your studio work, helped you build a fan base. Instead, you let me think you were just ordinary. The word hit like a slap. Ordinary. As if being ordinary was something shameful, something to be hidden or apologized for. As if the 3 years we'd spent together, the late-night conversations about music and dreams and life, the quiet moments of genuine connection, were somehow diminished because they'd happened between two people. She thought we're regular college students, instead of a college student and a celebrity's brother. Madison, I need you to listen to yourself right now. Really listen. You're telling me that our relationship would have been better if you had known I could give you access to fame? You're saying that the person you fell in love with wasn't enough? But the person connected to your celebrity crush would have been... You're twisting my words, am I? 'Cause yesterday you told me I was nobody. Today you're calling me because you found out I'm somebody's brother. What changed about me between yesterday and today? Did I suddenly become more ambitious? Did my job at the record store suddenly become more prestigious? Did my Honda Civic turn into a luxury car? I could hear her crying again, but this time, it sounded different, less like grief and more like frustration, like a child who'd been denied something they wanted. Brittany says Derek's been lying about his connections, Madison said suddenly. She says he's just another wannabe trying to use people. She says I should have figured out about you and Jason months ago if I'd been paying attention to the right things. And what do you think? I think I made a mistake. I think I let other people influence me too much. I think I got caught up in wanting a certain kind of life and forgot about what was real. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get, but it still felt hollow. Madison had figured out she'd made an error in judgment. But it wasn't because she'd recognized the value of what we'd had together. It was because she'd realized she'd miscalculated the value of what I could offer her. Madison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. If Jason wasn't my brother, if I was just Ryan who works at a record store and drives an old car and wears vintage t-shirts, would you want me back? The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Ryan, that's not... we can't just pretend that's not part of who you are now. It was always part of who I am. You just didn't know it. But I'm still the same person who took you to small restaurants because I thought they had better food and more character than expensive places. I'm still the person who chose to work at a record store because I love music, not because I needed the money. I'm still the person who drives an old car because I care more about reliability than status. The only thing that changed is your perception of what those choices mean. But Ryan, we could have such an amazing life together now. I could quit school and focus on building my brand. You could introduce me to industry people, help me get partnerships and sponsorships. We could travel together, go to award shows, red carpet events. Madison, stop. Just stop and listen to what you're saying. But she was already deep into her fantasy, painting a picture of a life that revolved entirely around leveraging my connection to Jason for her own fame and fortune. She wasn't talking about supporting my music career or building something together. She was talking about using my family relationships to launch herself into a celebrity lifestyle she'd always dreamed of. I realized then that the Madison I'd fallen in love with might never have existed at all. Maybe what I'd interpreted as ambition was actually just hunger for fame. Maybe what I'd seen as confidence was really narcissism. Maybe the dreams she'd shared with me had never been about creating something meaningful, but about becoming someone important enough that others would want to know her. I have to go, I said finally. I have a shift at the record store. Ryan, wait, but I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. My relationship was over. My ex-girlfriend was having a public breakdown on social media, and I was about to become an unwilling participant in whatever drama would unfold when the full story came out. What I didn't expect was how relieved I felt. For the first time in months, I felt like I could see clearly. And what I saw was that I'd been lucky to discover Madison's true nature before making any bigger commitments to someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than an end in myself. By the time I arrived at Vinyl Dreams that afternoon, the internet had already done what the internet does best. It had turned Madison's emotional breakdown into entertainment. My coworker Sam was behind the counter, barely containing his excitement as he showed me his phone screen. Dude, you're not going to believe this, Sam said, pulling up TikTok. There's this girl who made a video crying about how she dumped Jason Chen's brother without knowing it, and now everyone's making response videos. Some people are calling her shallow. Others are saying you should have told her. And there's this whole debate about whether celebrities' families owe people disclosure of their connections. I watched as Sam scrolled through dozens of videos, each with thousands of views and hundreds of comments. People I'd never met were dissecting my relationship, debating Madison's character, and creating elaborate theories about celebrity culture and social media fame. It was surreal seeing my personal life become a trending topic. The crazy part, Sam continued, is that some people figured out where you work. And apparently Jason Chen fans have been calling the store all morning, asking if you're really his brother and if you can get them autographs or concert tickets. As if on cue, the phone rang. Sam answered with our standard greeting, then immediately rolled his eyes. No, we don't sell Jason Chen merchandise, and no, our employee cannot get you backstage passes. He hung up and looked at me sympathetically. It's been like this since we opened. I was processing this information when the bell above the door chimed and Brittany Walsh walked in. She looked around the store with obvious disdain, taking in the vintage posters, the rows of vinyl records, and the general atmosphere of a place that prioritized music over profit. She was dressed like she was going to a job interview at a fashion magazine, designer clothes, perfect makeup, and an expression that suggested she was doing us a favor by breathing our air. "Ryan," she said, approaching the counter with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. "We need to talk." Sam looked between us, clearly recognizing the drama potential of this moment. "I'll be in the back room doing inventory," he said, making himself scarce but probably staying close enough to eavesdrop. "What do you want, Brittany?" She placed her designer purse on the counter and looked at me with what I assumed was meant to be a sympathetic expression.
I want to help fix this situation."
"Madison is my best friend, and she's absolutely devastated. She's been crying for hours, and she's gotten so much hate online that she's had to turn off her comments." "That's unfortunate," I said, genuinely meaning it. I didn't wish Madison any real harm, even if I was done with our relationship. But I don't see how that's my problem to solve. Brittany's expression shifted slightly, revealing a flash of irritation before she recovered her concerned friend. "Persona, Ryan. You have to understand that Madison never meant to hurt you. She's young, she's ambitious, and she got caught up in the pressure of social media and her sorority sisters. But deep down, she really loves you." Brittany yesterday. "Your best friend told me I was nobody and would always be nobody. Today she wants me back because she found out I'm connected to someone famous. That's not love, that's opportunism. But that's exactly why this is so perfect." Brittany's mask slipped entirely, and I saw the calculating person underneath. "Think about it, Ryan. Madison has a huge social media following. She understands branding and marketing, and she's gorgeous. You have access to one of the biggest stars in the music industry. You two could be a power couple," Brittany said brightly. "The kind who shows up on red carpets and gets invited to exclusive industry parties." I blinked at her, genuinely stunned. "Brittany, are you actually trying to pitch my relationship? Like it's a business plan?" She didn't flinch. "All strong relationships have synergy. Madison could boost Jason's visibility with her following. Create content around your family dynamic, maybe even land brand deals through her proximity to celebrity. And you could give her access to events and connections that would take her years to build alone." The ease with which she turned my personal relationships into marketing opportunities was staggering. Suddenly it made sense why Madison saw everything as transactional. This was the environment that shaped her. "So what exactly am I supposed to gain from this little partnership?" I asked, wanting to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. Brittany gave me a puzzled look, like I was missing something obvious. "You'd get Madison back, for starters. And let's be honest, you two would look amazing together. She knows how to work a crowd, how to curate your public image. Social media reach would elevate your own profile. With her platform, you could even launch your own music career." I raised an eyebrow. "Brittany, I have a music career. I work with local artists, produce tracks, and I've been building a portfolio for years. I don't need internet fame to legitimize what I do." She waved that off. "That's small scale. I'm talking about real success, money, visibility, influence. Madison could help you turn your connection to Jason into something huge." "My connection to Jason?" I asked, voice sharpening. "You mean my brother?" "Exactly," she said, like I'd finally caught on. "You're sitting on gold family moments. Behind the scenes looks into Jason's creative process, maybe even a few brotherly collaborations. Madison knows how to turn that into content that goes viral. It could launch both of you into the spotlight." A cold realization settled in my chest. She wasn't talking about love or reconciliation. This wasn't about Madison missing me. This was about turning my brother into a marketing tool and making my private life a spectacle. "So just to be clear," I said, "you want me to exploit my brother for clicks and content?" "It's not exploitation. It's business," Brittany said with a shrug. "It's how the industry works. Look at influencer families, Kardashians, TikTok dynasties. They've built empires by being strategic with their fame. Jason is my brother, not a product," I said flatly. Brittany's smile faltered. "You're being naive. Fame is currency now, and you're sitting on a fortune you refuse to use. Madison is offering you a chance to do something with it. No, you're offering me that. And what you're suggesting is that I sell out my relationships for public attention." She dropped the pretense of friendliness then. Look, Madison messed up yesterday. Sure, but not the way you think. Her real mistake was dating someone who doesn't understand his value. You've been wasting your potential in this dusty record shop when you could have been building something bigger. Bigger based on what? On Jason? On the Chen? Name, do you even realize how many doors that could open? Madison went to Derek not because he was better than you, but because he had ambition. He got it. I leaned back against the racks of vinyl behind me, trying to absorb the full absurdity of what she was saying. In Brittany's world, I wasn't wrong for keeping my family private. I was wrong for not profiting from it. Let me ask you something, I said. Do you actually like Madison, or do you just see her as another brand? Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Of course I like her, she's my best friend. Then why are you pushing her to treat the people she loves like networking opportunities? If you really cared, wouldn't you want her with someone who sees her for who she is, not just for what she can offer online? I'm helping her reach her full potential, Brittany snapped. She's beautiful, magnetic, and she knows how to market herself. But she needs the right connections. You could have been that if you hadn't kept your identity under wraps. I wasn't hiding anything, I said. I was just being myself. I wanted to be known for who I am not, for who I'm related to. Brittany scoffed. Integrity doesn't get you invitations to music festivals or meetings with label execs. Madison understands that success is about image and strategy, not just talent. And what happens when the image fades? When the followers move on? What's left if everything you've built is based on borrowed fame? You diversify? She said instantly. You build a network. Lock in partnerships. Establish yourself as someone people want to be around. Madison could do that with your help. Just then, the shop's bell chimed, and Zoe Martinez walked in. She worked at the tutoring center on campus, genuine and the kind of person who always remembered your name and asked how your day was. Someone who liked people for who they weren't, what they could offer, said, pausing as she took in the tension. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just looking for that Radiohead album you mentioned. Back wall, third row from the top, I said, grateful for the distraction.
Us.
As Zoe walked toward the back, Brittany's eyes followed her, full of judgment. Is that your rebound? She said with a sneer. Madison figured you'd end up with someone like that. No style, no drive, no clue what it takes to be successful. My temper finally cracked. Someone like what, Brittany? She gave a dismissive wave. You know, average. It's the kind of person who thinks hard work at a normal job is good enough. Madison is offering you more than that. Zoe had clearly heard her. Her shoulders tensed as she flipped through records, pretending not to listen. I made my choice. Brittany, this conversation is over. You can tell Madison I heard her out. But I'm not interested in turning my brother into a brand or myself into a sideshow. And I'm definitely not interested in a relationship built on manipulation and performance. Brittany's expression turned cold. You're making a huge mistake, Ryan. Madison is way out of your league, and you know it. Without your connection to Jason, what are you really? A college student who works at a record store and drives a beat-up car? Madison was doing you a favor by dating you in the first place. There it is, I said quietly. That's what you really think. That Madison was slumming it with me, that I should be grateful for her attention, that I owe her something because she's beautiful and popular. I'm just being realistic about social hierarchies. Madison could have any guy she wants. The fact that she chose you and that she wants you back even after what happened should tell you something about how special this opportunity is. Zoe had made her way back to the front of the store, Radiohead album in hand, and was waiting politely for our conversation to end. But I could see in her expression that she'd heard enough to understand what was happening. Brittany, I want you to leave. And I want you to tell Madison that if she wants to talk to me, she can call me herself, instead of sending intermediaries to negotiate our relationship like it's a business deal. Brittany picked up her purse and headed toward the door, but she couldn't resist one final shot. You'll regret this, Ryan. Madison won't wait forever. When she moves on with someone who actually appreciates what she brings to the table, you'll realize what you threw away. After she left, the store felt immediately lighter. Zoe approached the counter with her album, shaking her head. Wow, she said simply. That was intense. Yeah, sorry you had to witness that. Don't apologize. That was educational. Zoe set the album on the counter and looked at me seriously. Can I ask you something? Is it true that you're Jason Chen's brother? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't. Didn't what? Make a big deal about it? Create social media content about knowing you? Try to use you to get closer to a celebrity? Zoe smiled wryly. Ryan, I work 3 part-time jobs to pay for school and send money home to my family. I don't have time for celebrity worship or social media scheming. I just wanted to know if the rumors were true. They're true. Jason's my younger brother. We're close, but I've always kept that separate from my life here because I wanted people to know me for who I am, not who I'm related to. Noe nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. It must be weird having people's perception of you change overnight because of something that was always true but just wasn't public knowledge. It's very weird. Suddenly, people who thought I was nobody yesterday think I'm somebody today, but nothing about me actually changed. Everything about them changed, though Zoe said quietly. You got to see who they really are when they thought you couldn't do anything for them. That's actually kind of a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Zoe was right. The whole situation with Madison had revealed something important about character. It was about values, about what people prioritized when they thought no one important was watching. Can I ask you something else? Zoe said, then continued. Before I could answer, why do you work here? I mean, if your brother is famous enough that people are making viral videos about being connected to him, presumably you don't need the money? It was a fair question, and one that got to the heart of why Madison and I had been fundamentally incompatible. I work here because I love music, and this job teaches me about the industry from the ground up. I get to discover new artists, learn about different genres, understand what makes certain records special. Plus, the owner lets me use the backroom studio space to work on my own projects. So it's not about the money, it's about the education and the passion. Exactly. I like the people I meet here. Music lovers, collectors, artists trying to make it. They're here because they care about something bigger than themselves. Zoe smiled. That's really cool. Most people our age are so focused on shortcuts to success that they miss the value of actually learning their craft. We talked for a few more minutes about music and school and life goals, and I was struck by how easy the conversation was. Zoe didn't ask about Jason, didn't hint around for connections or favors, didn't treat me any differently than she had before she knew about my family. She was just herself, smart, hardworking, genuine, and focused on building something meaningful. With her own efforts. After she left, I spent the rest of my shift thinking about the contrast between her reaction and Brittany's. One person saw my family connection as an opportunity to exploit, while the other saw it as an interesting fact that didn't change anything about who I was or how I should be treated. As closing time approached, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short but loaded with implication. Ryan, this is Derek. We should talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding about everything that happened. I stared at the message for a long moment, wondering what angle Derek was planning to work now that his supposed industry connections had been exposed as fiction. Then I deleted the message without responding. I'd had enough manipulation for. One day, and something told me that Derek's version of clearing up misunderstandings would be just as self-serving as Brittany's relationship negotiations. The truth was becoming clearer with each conversation. This wasn't really about Madison's mistake or Derek's deception or Brittany's schemes. It was about fundamental differences in values, in how we saw relationships, success, and what it meant to live with integrity. And while the revelations of the past 2 days had been painful, they'd also been clarifying in a way I hadn't expected. As I locked up the store and headed home, I realized I was looking forward to whatever came next. For the first time in months, I felt like I was seeing clearly. And what I saw was the possibility of building something real with people who valued authenticity over opportunity. The storm wasn't over yet, could feel that much. But for the first time since this whole situation began, I felt ready to weather whatever came next. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came 3 days later, and it happened in the most public way possible. I was walking across campus to my music production seminar when I heard shouting from the direction of the student center. A crowd had gathered around the main entrance, phones out, recording whatever drama was unfolding in the center of the circle. As I got closer, I could hear Madison's voice rising above the general commotion. She was standing on the steps of the student center, and it looked like she was giving some kind of speech or presentation. Derek was beside her, looking uncomfortable, but trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor. Brittany was there too, along with several other members of Madison's sorority, all dressed like they were attending a press conference. "I want everyone to know the truth about what happened," Madison was saying, her voice carrying across the quad. "I made a mistake, but it wasn't the mistake everyone thinks it was. My mistake was trusting someone who lied to me for 3 years about who he really was." My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. Madison had decided that the best way to handle the social media backlash was to flip the narrative, to make herself the victim of my supposed deception rather than the person who'd ended a relationship based on materialistic judgments. "For 3 years, I dated someone I thought was honest and genuine," she continued. "Someone I trusted with my heart, my dreams, my future. But the whole time he was hiding the fact that he comes from wealth and fame. He let me struggle with student loans while knowing his family could help. He watched me work multiple jobs to afford basic things while he pretended to be in the same situation." The crowd was eating it up. I could see people nodding along, their expressions shifting from curiosity to sympathy for Madison. Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's messed up," and others murmured agreement. Derek stepped forward, clearly having been coached for this moment. "I've known Ryan Chen for years," he lied smoothly, "and I can tell you that this kind of manipulation is typical for him. He gets off on making people feel inferior while secretly knowing he's better than them." I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching this performance with a mixture of fascination and horror. They had completely rewritten history, turning Madison's materialistic dismissal of me into my emotional manipulation of her. They'd transformed Derek's fake connections and attempted social climbing into him being a concerned friend. Trying to protect Madison from my deception, Brittany took her turn at the microphone they'd somehow procured. What makes this even worse is that Madison is one of the most genuine, caring people I know. She's been promoting mental health awareness on her platform, encouraging her followers to pursue their dreams despite financial obstacles, sharing her own struggles with student debt and family pressure. And the whole time, her boyfriend was laughing at her behind her back. The revisionist history was breathtaking. Madison's social media presence, which had always been focused on lifestyle content, fashion, and celebrity worship, was now being reframed as social activism. Her complaints about money, which had always been about wanting more luxury rather than meeting basic needs, were now positioned as authentic struggles that I had cruelly allowed to continue. "I want to read you something," Madison said, pulling out her phone. "This is a text message Ryan sent me just last week." She began reading, "You deserve better than this, Madison. You deserve someone who can give you the world." I remembered that text. I'd sent it during one of our arguments. When Madison had been complaining about not being able to afford a designer dress for some sorority event, in context, I'd been trying to tell her that she deserved someone who appreciated her for who she was, rather than what she could buy. But Madison was presenting it as evidence that I'd been taunting her with cryptic references to my hidden wealth. How was I supposed to know what that meant? Madison continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought he was being sweet, telling me I deserved love and respect. I didn't know he was literally talking about giving me the world because his brother is one of the most famous musicians on the planet." Derek nodded gravely. "Hey, it's psychological manipulation. It's making someone feel like they're not good enough, while secretly knowing you could solve all their problems but choosing not to. It's a form of emotional abuse." The crowd's energy was shifting. I could feel hostile glances being thrown in my direction as people began to notice me standing there. Someone near me whispered, "Is that him? Is that Ryan?" And suddenly I was the center of attention in a way I'd never wanted to be. Madison spotted me in the crowd, and her expression immediately shifted to one of hurt betrayal mixed with righteous anger. "There he is," she said, pointing directly at me. "There's the person who lied to me for 3 years about who he really was." The crowd parted as I walked forward, feeling like I was approaching the gallows. But as I got closer to the makeshift stage, something interesting happened. I started to notice the details that the crowd's emotional response was overlooking. Derek's expensive clothes and BMW, keys hanging from his belt didn't match his story about being a concerned friend, protecting Madison from wealth-based manipulation. Brittany's designer accessories seemed inconsistent with her positioning as someone who understood financial struggle. And Madison herself was wearing new clothes, expensive makeup, and carrying a purse that cost more than most students' monthly budgets. But most telling of all was the professional quality of their setup. Someone had provided them with a wireless microphone system, coordinated their outfits, and clearly coached them on their talking points. This wasn't a spontaneous emotional outburst. It was a calculated public relations campaign. "Madison," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent quad, "can you tell everyone here how much money you spent on Jason Chen concert tickets last semester?" She blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "That's not relevant." $800 for VIP tickets to 3 different shows," I continued, "plus another $400 on merchandise and travel expenses. You put it all on credit cards because you said it was an investment in your happiness." Derek stepped forward aggressively. "You're trying to change the subject I'm providing." "Context," I said calmly. "Madison, can you also tell everyone about the shopping trip you took to Portland last month? The one where you spent $600 in one afternoon because you said you needed to invest in your image?" Madison's face was turning red, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Ryan, you're trying to make me sound materialistic? When you know I was just trying to build a professional presence with what money?" I asked. "Because according to what you just told this crowd, you were struggling financially, working multiple jobs, unable to afford basic necessities. But somehow you could afford luxury concerts and shopping sprees?" Brittany jumped in, clearly recognizing that their narrative was starting to unravel. It's exactly the kind of manipulation we're talking about. He's trying to shame Madison for having aspirations, for wanting to look professional, for supporting her favorite artist. "I'm not shaming anyone," I said, turning to address the crowd directly. "I'm pointing out that the financial struggles you're hearing about weren't about affording food or textbooks or rent. They were about affording a lifestyle that Madison wanted but couldn't sustain. And when I didn't provide that lifestyle, she decided I wasn't worth her time." Someone in the crowd shouted, "But you could have helped her if you wanted to." It was a fair point, and one I'd been wrestling with myself. I took a deep breath and decided to be completely honest. "You're right. Could have helped Madison. Financially if she'd needed it. But she never asked for help with actual necessities. She never said she couldn't afford groceries or was worried about making rent or needed help with textbooks. The only money complaints I ever heard were about wanting things that were beyond her means: designer clothes, expensive concerts, luxury experiences." I paused, looking directly at Madison. And when I did offer to help with those things, Madison always refused, saying she wanted to earn them herself. So I respected that. I thought her independence was admirable. Madison's expression faltered slightly. She'd positioned herself as someone who would have gratefully accepted help with financial struggles. But the truth was that she'd consistently refused my offers to pay for things, insisting that she wanted to maintain her independence and not be kept by a boyfriend. Derek sensed the shift in momentum and tried to regain control. "That's not the point. The point is that Ryan deliberately hid his family connections while watching. Madison struggled to build industry connections on her own." "What industry connections was Madison trying to build?" I asked. "Because as far as I know, her major is communications with a focus on social media marketing. Her career goals have always been about becoming an influencer, not working in the music industry." Brittany stepped forward again. "Madison has always been passionate about music. She's been a huge Jason Chen fan for years, and she's interested in the entertainment industry. Being a fan isn't the same as working in the industry," I said. And Madison never expressed any interest in music production, artist management, record label work, or any other actual music industry career. Her passion was for celebrity culture, not music as a profession. I could see people in the crowd starting to look more skeptical. The narrative that Madison had been unfairly denied access to career opportunities was falling apart under basic scrutiny. Madison seemed to realize that her prepared talking points weren't working, so she shifted to a more emotional approach. Ryan, how can you stand there and humiliate me like this? After everything we meant to each other, after 3 years of what I thought was love, Madison, I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm trying to correct the record, because what you're telling people isn't what actually happened. Then what did happen? Someone in the crowd called out. I looked around at all the faces watching me, phones still recording, and made a decision that I knew would change everything. What happened is that 3 days ago, Madison broke up with me at a coffee shop. She told me I was nobody and would always be nobody because I work at a record store and drive an old car. She said she wanted to be with someone who had ambition and connections. Someone who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. Then she left with Derek, who she thought could provide those things. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Later that evening, Madison found out through social media that I'm related to someone famous. Suddenly, the same person who'd called me nobody was texting me all night, wanting to get back together. Not because she realized she'd misjudged my character or my potential, but because she realized I could give her access to celebrity culture. Madison tried to interrupt, but I continued. So when Madison talks about being deceived, she's right. But she wasn't deceived by me hiding my family connections. She was deceived by her own assumptions about what makes someone valuable. She thought wealth and fame were the only things that mattered. So when she looked at me, that's all she could see, or couldn't see. Derek was looking increasingly uncomfortable, probably realizing that his own role in this drama wasn't going to survive much scrutiny. And Derek, I said, turning to face him directly, since you've known me for years and can speak to my character, maybe you can tell everyone about those messages you've been sending to my brother's management team, trying to use Madison's fan status to create business opportunities for yourself. Derek's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, really. Because my brother's manager forwarded me some interesting emails about someone named Derek Thompson, claiming he could deliver social media promotion and fan engagement in exchange for industry access. Sound familiar? The crowd was starting to murmur, and I could see the shift happening in real time. The narrative of me as a manipulative deceiver was collapsing, replaced by a much more complicated story about social media culture, celebrity worship, and the commodification of relationships. Brittany made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. This is exactly what we mean about manipulation. Ryan is using his privileged position to destroy Madison's reputation and social standing. He's weaponizing his family connections against someone who genuinely loved him. I turned to look at Brittany directly. Is that what you think love looks like? Because I was there when Madison told me I was nobody. I was there when she said I'd never amount to anything. I was there when she left me for someone she thought could give her a better life. That's not love, that's calculation. Love evolves, Madison said desperately. Act! People make mistakes when they're scared about their future. I was wrong about what mattered. But that doesn't mean my feelings weren't real. Madison, if your feelings were real, they wouldn't have changed based on discovering my family connections. If you loved me, you would have loved me when you thought I was nobody. The fact that you only want me back now that you know I'm somebody tells us everything we need to know about what your feelings were actually based on. The silence that followed was deafening. You could see people in the crowd processing what they'd heard, comparing the two versions of events, trying to figure out who was telling the truth. Finally, someone near the front of the crowd spoke up. It was Zoe, and her voice was clear and steady. I have a question, she said, looking directly at Madison. If Ryan had told you about his brother on your first date, do you think you would have fallen in love with Ryan the person, or with Ryan the connection to Jason Chen? Madison stared at Zoe, clearly unprepared for that question. That's not fair. You can't separate someone's identity from their family and circumstances. Sure you can, Zoe replied, because that's exactly what Ryan did. He separated his identity from his family's fame so that people would get to know him for who he is, not what he could do for them. And based on what we just heard, that was probably a smart choice. The crowd was starting to disperse, the energy of the confrontation fading as people lost interest in the drama. But I could see Madison's sorority sisters gathering around her, probably preparing for damage control. While Derek was already backing away from the situation, likely calculating how to distance himself from the fallout. As the quad emptied, I found myself standing alone with Zoe, who had waited for everyone else to leave. "That was intense," she said simply. "Yeah, probably not how I wanted to spend my Tuesday afternoon. Can I ask you something? Do you think Madison really believed her own story about being deceived? Or was this all just damage control for her social media image?" I thought about it for a moment. I think Madison is really good at convincing herself that her motivations are pure. She probably does believe that she was wronged, that she was the victim in this situation. But I also think she's been surrounded by people who've taught her to see relationships as transactions and to measure her worth by her proximity to famous or wealthy people. "That's kind of sad," Zoe said. "It is, because Madison actually is smart and talented and capable of building something meaningful on her own. But somewhere along the way, she got convinced that the only path to success was through other people's achievements." We walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and I realized that this conversation, this honest, thoughtful exchange with someone who saw me as a person rather than a connection, was exactly what had been missing from my relationship with Madison. "Hey Zoe," I said, as we reached the intersection where our paths diverged. "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Not as a rebound or a statement or anything dramatic, just as two people who seem to have their priorities straight." She smiled, and it was the first genuinely warm moment I'd experienced in days. "I'd like that. A fair warning, I'm going to order whatever's cheapest on the menu, and I'm going to pay for myself." "Perfect," I said. "That sounds absolutely perfect." As I watched her walk away, I realized that the confrontation with Madison had been exactly what I needed. Not because I'd won some kind of public argument, but because it had forced me to articulate what I actually valued in relationships and in life. And what I valued, it turned out, was authenticity, integrity, and the kind of connection that exists, independent of what people could do for each other. The storm wasn't over. I was sure Madison and her friends would continue trying to control the narrative on social media. But for the first time since this whole situation began, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. 2 months later, the campus had mostly moved on to newer dramas, but the ripple effects of that day in the quad were still playing out in ways I hadn't expected. Madison had indeed tried to salvage her narrative on social media, posting a series of increasingly desperate videos that only seemed to make things worse for her. The internet, as it tends to do, had picked apart every inconsistency in her story until the truth became undeniable. What surprised me most wasn't the public vindication, but how the whole experience had clarified what I actually wanted from life. I was sitting in the back room of Vinyl Dreams working on a new track when Jason called with news that would have seemed like a dream come true just a few months earlier. "Ryan, I've been talking to my label about you," Jason said, his voice crackling through the phone from whatever city his tour had taken him to this week. "Interested in hearing some of your work. Apparently word got around about your production skills, and they're looking for fresh talent." 6 months ago, this call would have felt like winning the lottery. A major record label wanting to hear my music. Connections opening up because of Jason's recommendation. Doors that most aspiring producers could only dream of walking through. But now, sitting in the cramped studio space that Sam had helped me set up, surrounded by equipment I'd saved for and projects I'd built from scratch, I felt something unexpected. Hesitation. "That's incredible, Jason, really. But can I ask you something? Did they reach out because they've heard my work and think it's good? Or because I'm your brother and they want to stay on your good side?" Jason was quiet for a moment.
How does it
"Matter? I mean, connections are how the industry works. Talent matters, but so does having people who believe in you and can open doors. It matters to me. Because if I get hired because I'm Jason Shen's brother, then I'll never know if I'm actually good enough to succeed on my own merit. And everyone else will always wonder the same thing. Ryan, you're overthinking this. You're good enough. I've heard your work. But this industry is brutally competitive. If you have an advantage, you should use it." I understood his logic, and part of me knew he was right. But the experience with Madison had taught me something valuable about the difference between opportunity and authenticity. Getting what you want through connections might be practical, but it comes with a cost. What if I submitted my work anonymously first? I suggested. What if they could evaluate my music without knowing who I am? And then if they're interested, we reveal the family connection. Jason laughed, but not unkindly. It's very idealistic, bro. Sure. If that's what you need to feel good about it, I can arrange that. After we hung up, I sat in the studio for a long time thinking about paths and choices and what it meant to build something meaningful. Through the window, I could see the main floor of the record store, where Sam was helping a customer find some obscure jazz album. It occurred to me that this little shop, which Madison had seen as evidence of my lack of ambition, had actually become the foundation of everything I was building. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Coffee later? I have news about the scholarship. Application. Over the past 2 months, Zoe and I had fallen into an easy friendship that was slowly becoming something more. She was applying for a graduate program in education policy, working toward her goal of reforming how schools in underserved communities approached music and arts education. Her passion for the work, combined with her complete lack of interest in leveraging any connection to fame or wealth, had shown me what it looked like when someone pursued their dreams with integrity. We met at a small cafe near campus, one of those places that cared more about good coffee than Instagram-worthy aesthetic. Zoe arrived with her usual stack of books and papers, her laptop bag worn from years of use, and the kind of tired smile that came from working multiple jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. So, she said, settling into the booth across from me, I got the scholarship, Zoe. That's amazing. Full ride to Columbia. The full ride to Columbia, she confirmed, grinning. Which means I can quit 2 of my 3 jobs and actually focus on my studies for the first time in 4 years. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Shh. You earned every bit of that. Your application essay about transforming arts education was incredible. Thanks. Speaking of transforming things, how did the conversation with Jason go? I told her about the record label opportunity and my concerns about accepting help that was based on family connections rather than merit. Zoe listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just letting me work through my thoughts out loud. Can I tell you something? She said when I finished. What you're wrestling with is exactly why I knew you were someone worth getting to know. What do you mean? Most people would jump at the chance to fast-track their career through family connections. The fact that you're concerned about earning your success rather than just achieving it tells me everything I need to know about your character. But am I being stupid? Naive? Madison and her friends would definitely say I was throwing away a golden opportunity. So he considered this. Maybe, but here's the thing, you're not Madison. You don't measure your worth by external validation or compare your success to other people's achievements. You care about building something meaningful, and you want to know that what you build is really yours. She was right, and hearing her articulate it helped me understand my own motivations more clearly. This wasn't about rejecting help or proving some kind of point. It was about ensuring that whatever success I achieved felt authentic and sustainable. Side Zoe continued, you're already building something here. The local artists you've been working with, the partnerships you've developed with other producers, the reputation you're earning in the Portland music scene, that's all yours. No one can take that away or question whether you deserved it. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice was unfortunately familiar. Ryan, this is Madison. Please don't hang up. I looked at Zoe, who raised her eyebrows, but gestured for me to take the call. What do you want, Madison? I need to talk to you, in person. There are things I need to say, things I need to apologize. Can you meet me at the coffee shop? The one where we used to study together? The irony of her choosing the location where she'd broken up with me wasn't lost on me. Madison, I don't think that's a good idea. We've both moved on. Please. Just 30 minutes. I promise I'm not trying to get back together or ask for anything. I need to make things right. Zoe leaned forward and whispered, you should go. Not for her, but for you. Sometimes closure requires facing things directly. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet Madison in an hour. Zoe offered to come with me for moral support, but I felt like this was something I needed to handle alone. The coffee shop felt different when I walked in. Same layout, same menu, same barista, who'd witnessed our breakup 2 months earlier. But the emotional weight of the place had changed. Where I'd once felt hurt and confused, now I just felt curious about what Madison thought she needed to say. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner, looking smaller. Somehow then I remembered. Her usual perfect appearance had been replaced by something more natural, less makeup. Simpler clothes, hair that looked like she'd actually slept on it. She stood up when she saw me, then seemed to think better of it and sat back down. "Thank you for coming," she said as I took the seat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. To be honest, I almost didn't. What do you want to talk about?" "Madison." She took a deep breath, and I could see her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. "I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not the performative kind I did on social media. I want to acknowledge what I did wrong and take responsibility for it. This wasn't what I'd expected." The Madison I'd known had never been particularly good at admitting mistakes or accepting blame. "Okay, I'm listening." "I treated you terribly, Ryan. Not just at the end, but throughout our relationship. I spent 3 years measuring you against some impossible standard of success that had nothing to do with who you actually are or what you're actually capable of. I made you feel like you weren't enough when the truth was that I was the one who wasn't enough." I waited for her to continue, not sure where this was going. After everything exploded, after the social media disaster and the public confrontation, I had to take a long look at my life and my choices. My parents made me see a therapist, and she helped me understand some things about myself that I didn't want to face. Madison paused, seemingly gathering courage for whatever she was about to say next. "The truth is, I was using you, Ryan. Not consciously, not maliciously, but I was using you to feel better about myself. When I was with you, I felt smart and interesting and valued. But I convinced myself that those feelings came from your validation rather than from my own worth. So when I started worrying about my future, about whether I was successful enough or impressive enough, I blamed you for not making me feel secure. This level of self-awareness was genuinely surprising. What changed? What made you realize all this, honestly?" Watching how quickly Derek disappeared when the truth came out, and seeing how Brittany turned on me the moment my social media following started dropping, I realized that the people I thought were my real friends were just as transactional as I had been with you. Madison's voice was getting steadier as she continued, as if saying these things out loud was helping her process them. I also realized that everything I thought I wanted, the fame, the connections, the celebrity lifestyle, was just a way of avoiding the hard work of figuring out who I actually am and what I actually care about. It was easier to chase after your brother's world than to build my own. So what are you doing now? What does building your own world look like? I'm changing my major to nonprofit management. I'm working with an organization that helps young women develop financial literacy and business skills. I'm staying off social media for a while, trying to remember what it feels like to value things that don't generate likes or followers. I had to admit, this was not the conversation I'd expected to have. The person sitting across from me seemed genuinely different from the Madison who'd called me nobody just 2 months earlier. "That sounds like good work," I said carefully. "I'm glad you're finding direction. Ryan, I need you to know that I don't expect anything from this conversation. I'm not asking for forgiveness, and I'm definitely not asking you to get back together with me. I just needed you to hear me. Take responsibility for what I did, because you deserved better than the way I treated you." We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself thinking about growth and change and whether people could really transform themselves in meaningful ways. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "If I wasn't Jason's brother, if I was just Ryan, the record store employee with the old car and the vintage t-shirts, would you have come to these realizations? Would you have done this work on yourself?" Madison considered the question seriously. "I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I needed the shock of realizing how wrong I'd been about everything to wake me up. Maybe I needed to lose something real to understand what real actually meant. That's an honest answer. I'm trying to be more honest these days. It's about everything, but especially about my own motivations and mistakes." We talked for another 20 minutes, and I found myself impressed by the depth of Madison's self-reflection. She'd clearly put serious work into understanding not just what she'd done wrong, but why she'd done it. She talked about growing up in a family that measured success primarily through external achievements. about social media culture that commodified relationships and experiences, about the pressure she'd felt to justify her worth through her connections. 2. Successful people. When it was time to leave, Madison stood up and extended her hand for a handshake rather than going for a hug. Thank you for listening, Ryan. And for what it's worth, I think Zoe is lucky to have someone who values authenticity over opportunity. I was surprised she knew about Zoe, but then remembered that campus gossip traveled fast. How did you pay attention to things that matter now? Madison said with a small smile. And you finding someone who appreciates you for who you are instead of what you can do for them that matters. As I walked back across campus, I felt something I hadn't expected, a sense of completion. Not closure exactly, but a feeling that all the pieces of this experience had finally fallen into place. Madison's apology hadn't changed what had happened between us, but it had shown me that growth was possible, that people could learn from their mistakes and choose to become better versions of themselves. I found Zoe in the library, surrounded by graduate school preparation materials and scholarship applications. When she saw me, she looked up with curiosity and concern. How did it go? I sat down next to her and told her about the conversation, about Madison's apology and her commitment to changing her priorities and approach to life. Zoe listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just processing what I was telling her. That must have been difficult for her, Zoe said when I finished. Admitting that level of responsibility takes real courage. It did seem genuine, different from what I expected. People can change, Ryan. Sometimes it takes losing something important to wake them up to what they actually value. That evening, I called Jason back with my decision about the record label opportunity. I would submit my work anonymously, and if they were interested based purely on the music, then we could discuss next steps. If they weren't interested, I'd continue building my reputation and skills in Portland until I was ready to try again. You know, Jason said, I think you're making the right choice. Honestly, I'm proud of you for caring more about earning your success than just achieving it. Thanks. That means a lot, especially coming from you. Can I tell you something? Sometimes I wonder what my career would have looked like if I'd had your approach from the beginning. If I'd been more focused on the music and less focused on the industry connections and the fast track to fame. It was an interesting perspective from someone who'd achieved everything that Madison and Derek and Brittany thought they wanted. 3 weeks later, I got a call from the A&R representative at Jason's label. They wanted to offer me a production contract based on the anonymous submissions I'd sent. When I revealed my identity and family connection, the representative laughed and said they'd suspected there might be a connection, but that the music had spoken for itself. The contract was smaller than what they might have offered if I'd led with the family connection, but it felt earned in a way that mattered to me. I would be working with developing artists, helping them find their sound and build their careers from the ground up. It was exactly the kind of work I'd been preparing for during my time at Vinyl Dreams. Zoe celebrated with me over dinner at the same small cafe where we'd had our first real conversation. She was leaving for Columbia in 2 months, but we'd decided to maintain our relationship long distance. We'd built something based on mutual respect and shared values, and we both believed it was worth the effort to preserve. So what's next? She asked as we shared a piece of chocolate cake that was too expensive for either of our budgets, but felt appropriate for the occasion. Well, I start with the label in 6 weeks. I'll probably keep working at the store part-time because I love it there, and Sam's been talking about expanding into music production services. And I want to keep working with local artists here in Portland and personally. I reached across the table and took her hand. Personally, I want to keep building something real with someone who sees me for who I am instead of who I'm connected to. That sounds perfect, she said, squeezing my hand. Absolutely perfect. 6 months later, I ran into Derek at a coffee shop downtown. He was working as a sales associate at a luxury car dealership, apparently having dropped out of school when his family's financial situation changed. He seemed genuinely embarrassed about his role in the Madison situation and apologized for the way he'd acted. I got caught up in trying to be someone I wasn't, he admitted. Trying to use other people's success to make myself feel important. It was stupid and it hurt people. I appreciated his honesty, and we ended up having a surprisingly good conversation about authenticity and the pressure to project success, even when you're struggling. As for Brittany, She'd apparently moved to Los Angeles to pursue an influencer career. But from what I heard through campus gossip, she was struggling to gain traction without Madison's larger social media presence to leverage. The experience had taught me something valuable about the difference between success and fulfillment, between opportunity and authenticity, between building something meaningful and simply acquiring status symbols. Madison had been right about one thing: I had been hiding who I really was. But what I'd been hiding wasn't wealth or connections or potential for fame. What I'd been hiding was my belief that relationships should be based on genuine connection rather than mutual benefit. That success should be earned through effort and talent rather than inherited through family connections. And that the most important things in life couldn't be monetized or leveraged or turned into social media content. I'd spent 3 years with someone who saw me as an investment opportunity. And now I was building a life with someone who saw me as a person worth knowing for my own sake. The difference was everything. As I walked home that evening, past the record store where I'd learned to trust my own instincts, through the campus where I'd discovered what I actually valued, toward the apartment where I was building a career, based on my own efforts and talents, I realized that Madison had been wrong about something else too. I wasn't nobody. I'd never been nobody. I was someone who chose authenticity over opportunity, integrity over influence, and meaningful connection over strategic advantage. And for the first time in my life, that felt like exactly the right person to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.